Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of your favorite podcast, The Fantasy Birds. I'm back with my normal co-host, Mr. SJN. How are we doing?
Doing good. Currently quarantining because, but besides that, doing well.
All right, well, let's hop right into the fantasy basketball rankings.
Feel free to sponsor us too.
Yes, sir. All right, let's get right into our rankings. We'll start up at the bottom, work our way to the top like we usually do. Same face, same place. We got the Bonafide Scrubs at number 14 coming off another loss. And you still got to point back to their number one pick, Devin Booker, not getting the job done. Russell Westbrook doing everything he can, averaging over 55-plus points a game when he does play, not on back-to-backs, which is going to hurt this team as well. But John Wall coming back, doing a pretty solid performance in the game. James Harden miss. Look for him to continue. And then Tobias Harris even stepping up, but he can't carry the weight of having a Devin Booker in the first round, so this team's going to continue to suffer.
Yeah, Bonafide Scrubs got the least amount of points in the league. Still got to respect him though, because of Russell Westbrook. Cue the edit, but nothing else that I'm really liking on this team right now. With Booker playing like ass and John Wall playing well when Harden sits, but I'm still curious to see how that duo will mesh. But besides that, this team just doesn't really have much going for it.
Let's not overlook Devin Booker as a completely garbage player. I think he could be a buy low candidate for some teams in the league looking to improve, but as it stands right now, Devin Booker just not getting it done.
Also, good week by Tobias Harris.
Solid week. Let's go into Sammy Eagles Barbecue Chicken. A 1-1 team that previously at number 14 has made its way to 13, rides steady there, being carried by Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis, but just not getting enough help, especially with a Michael Porter Jr. injury as he was starting to hit some strides, and a Larry Nance Jr. and a McCall Bridges in the starting lineup. You don't feel good about that. What do you think about this team?
Yeah, I agree. This team's going to continue to struggle with MPJ out, being forced to start Evan Fournier and Bridges, like we noted. I think Nance will continue to produce with Kevin Love's injury, but the combo of Fournier and Bridges in the starting lineup, you're just not going to win many games no matter who else you're starting. So, yeah, but I like seeing the uptick in production from Jamal Murray. It's something you're going to have to ride with him. He's got to have his hot streaks and his cold streaks, and just what you're going to have to live with when you got a guy like that on your team.
Yeah, this team's going to put together a couple of W's in the upcoming week. It's going to have to be Jamal Murray picking up the slack from Michael Porter Jr. So if there's any saving grace to Porter Jr. being injured, it's the potential of Murray getting some extra usage and maybe even some extra, points, assists, whatever. What you have it.
Exactly.
Go to number 12, and it's going to be a complete drastic drop-off for It's LeJon Brames, dropping from number 7 all the way to 12. And it's no secret, Ja Morant ankle injury, and this team was struggling to put it together with Ja Morant being carried by Jokic and Morant. So losing one of those two top dogs, this team's all near the bottom of the league now. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, really only two starter-worthy players in the starting lineup, in Jokic and Paul George. I'm looking to see how Draymond will start to come around, if he'll start to get more minutes on that Warriors team. I think he'll end up being a starter-worthy option. But I think this team's going to continue to struggle as long as its team name has absolutely no relevance to the team itself. So
I agree. We keep asking for a name change. We're not getting it. It looks like we're not getting any more wins for this team. And it goes back to Paul George in the third round. This player, when you have an injury to top two guys, you're relying on those third through fifth round players, and Paul George in the third round not able to carry a team, as we're seeing from his LeJon Brames. Let's go to number 11, another massive drop-off due to injury/COVID restrictions. Kevin Durant going to have to quarantine for a 7-day period. But it's not all about Durant. It's also second-round pick Pascal Siakam not playing up to his potential. Pretty bad couple of weeks for him. And whenever you have to start a Seth Curry and a James Wiseman in a lineup, you're not feeling too good about yourself. But Domantas Sabonis carrying this team, doing everything he can to get this team going in the right direction. Really the only saving grace for this team at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, Sabonis was just a hell of a pick by this guy, but besides that, his team's struggling right now, but I think he's in much better shape than the aforementioned teams. Siakam and Gordon Hayward both have had down weeks this past week, but I expect them to pick it back up. But yeah, I don't think this team's going to get a W with Durant on the bench.
Yeah. At number 10, we have the black sheep climbing the ranks one spot at a time. Damian Lillard off to a slow start, so you look for him to pick it back up. But Chris Paul and Fred VanVleet getting it done, leading him in the right direction. But the big key for here is Jimmy Butler, taken so highly in drafts, and he's just not putting up points. Missed a couple games. We understand that, but multiple games under 10 points per game, actual points, not what you need from Jimmy Butler. He's got to get the scoring going so this team can get moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I respect this team. I think that every single one of his players right now is underperforming, and I expect them to return to the norm. Outside of Fred VanVleet, every other one of his players kind of underperforming, but I think this team has potential, and especially when we're going to have to see how Kemba plays when he comes back. This team does have sneaky playoff potential, but right now you're going to need Lillard or Chris Paul to get out of – well, neither of them are playing too bad, but just not up to the standards that you expect for either of them. So those two and Jimmy Butler, you're going to need to see more production out of those three guys.
Yeah, I think you're going to need Valanciunas to get it going a little bit more than what he's doing with a Jaren Jackson injury, because once you see Jaren Jackson return to the lineup, you got to assume that Valanciunas' production is going to come down a slight bit. So let's look for him and Kyle Anderson to get it going a little bit, to maybe push this team to a couple wins down the stretch, maybe fight for a playoff spot.
Yep.
At number 9, we have Saturdays are for Ja Boys, making a big jump in our rankings even after an 0-2 start. But you got to look at missed games for this team. James Harden missing a game with his knee injury and the COVID protocol from week 1. Kawhi Leonard having his mouth ripped open by teammates. And those two have led to losses for this team. I think they're much better than an 0-2 team, probably the best 0-2 team. That's why they're this highly ranked. But if they can get production from those backups for the Brooklyn Nets and Karis LeVert and Jared Allen, this team's going to put together a couple of sneaky victories going down the line.
Yeah, definitely. I think this team, I don't want to say this, I think it's better on paper than its record would show. You're right. This team's all about whether Harden and Kawhi are going to play or sit, and the weeks that they play, this team's going to be very fearsome. But when they don't, I mean, it's something you're going to have to live with when you draft a guy like Kawhi Leonard, as we've noted before. But I do want to see how Karis LeVert performs this week with Durant's entry. I think he'll get a huge bump in usage, so that's something that could propel this team to a victory this week. Also, I'm looking for MVP Lou Dort to step it up. Huge expectations going in this year, but he's underperformed so far. So,
yeah, I think it's also going to be interesting to see if Jared Allen can put together more and more minutes as he's playing pretty effectively for that Brooklyn Nets team. If he can carve out a bigger role over DeAndre Jordan, then I think he could be pretty effective down the line in fantasy and for this Saturdays or for Ja Boys roster. Let's go to number 8, and it's the widely known, widely talked about Mr. James. If it's his best team or not, that's yet to be determined. But Ben Simmons and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, we talked about preseason how we didn't like these picks struggling out the gate, especially Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Let's see if Ben Simmons can get it going, but Jaylen Brown really carrying this team, filling the role nicely with a Kemba Walker out, a little side piece to Jason Tatum. But RJ Barrett introducing to the starting lineup, performing well in the beginning of the week. Let's see if he can get that going with Alex Burks. And then stinker of all stinkers, Bismack Biyombo at the bottom of your lineup. Not gonna make anyone too happy, except for your opponent. But that's what Mr. James is looking like this week.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. James' best team. I mean, how much are we really saying with that one? Doesn't have the greatest track record, but I think I'm hopeful for this team. I think the Jaylen Brown pick is looking like an absolute steal. Really no major holes in the roster outside of his last forward spot with Bismack, but you want to see Nurkic just take advantage. Like, we all thought Nurkic was going to be a very good fantasy player this year, and it's looking like he is going to underperform. But I mean, that's the guy that you really want to see be able to be a solid producer for your lineup. So I expect him to return to form, but until then, I mean, his last roster spot, he's just going to struggle to fill. And I do think RJ Barrett will become or will continue to be a sustainable starter as long as he averaged 40 and a half minutes per game this past week, which is just absurd. As long as he's getting that many minutes on that Knicks team, he'll continue to be a solid fantasy producer.
Yeah, another big piece of this puzzle for Mr. James is if he's going to get it going in the right direction. Got to be looking at Mr. Marvin Secure the Bagley Jr. there at the bottom of the bench. What's your opinions on him? Do you think he's a buy low candidate, or are you trying to move on from him at all costs if you're Mr. James?
I think he's buy low. I don't know if you saw the stuff on Twitter, but his dad was actually requesting him to get traded. So if that were to happen, maybe he'd see more minutes. But 24 and a half minutes he's averaging, I think, for the year. Let me check. 24.7 minutes. I mean, a big man that's playing that few minutes and not stuffing the stat sheet, just never going to be a starter worthy option in fantasy. So
Yeah, let's see what they can do there in Sacramento with the Bags, former number 2 overall pick. Let's go to number 7, and we got the Milwaukee Wolfhawks. And there's 4 parts of this team. We've talked about the Pelicans, we've got the Bucks, the Timberwolves, and the Hawks. And you gotta like it. You gotta like your Hawks players on this team. You're okay with your Pelicans. Not really a fan of your Timberwolves. And it starts with D'Angelo Russell. Even with a Karl Anthony Towns out, not really putting up the production you want in the points or assist category. Anthony Edwards, Ricky Rubio, Malik Beasley, all probably sneaking away some usage out of D'Angelo Russell. So if he can't get it going, look for this team to drop. But he's going to be the important piece down the line when you ask me for this team.
yeah, I think solid team all around. We saw Chris Middleton return to the mean after his incredible week 1. Zion also had a down week last week. I don't really have too much of an opinion on this team. I think he's definitely got a playoff built team. You're just not really championship level unless you see Russell or Lonzo Ball, one of those guys, really become a solid option, because right now they're looking like they're not even start worthy on a fantasy team.
Yeah, I think Clint Capella is noteworthy too. Getting off to a little slow start with the injury hampering coming into the season, but if he can get it going, he's starting to get some rebounds, starting to get some points in that offense with the Trae Young pick and roll action. If he can get that going where he's averaging a 15 and 10, maybe like 30, 35 fantasy points a game, this team might be able to make some noise. It's going to be stay healthy for Mr. Clint Capella. At number 6, we got our very own Josh's Smooches climbing the ranks from number 9 all the way to number 6. And this has got to be Christian Wood coming out of the gates on fire, 20 and 10 performances left and right, looking like a bona fide all-star potential for this year to go along with the Giannis and the Donovan Mitchell. This team's looking good, especially if Kristaps Porzingis comes back healthy and he's playing big minutes. If Drew Holiday in the second round is able to get over this with a Christian Wood pick later in the draft, just got to find someone to fill in for Harrison Barnes in the meantime. If he can keep up his production going forward, this team's looking pretty solid.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on. Drew Holiday is absolute trash. But besides that, I'm liking the looks of this team. When you lose a starter like Kevin Love and you're missing that Porzingis spot, to have a guy like Harrison Barnes come in and put up some start-worthy stats is always nice to see. But yeah, I think whether this team is a championship contender or not is completely going to depend on Kristaps coming back and whether he is able to remain healthy once he does come back, because this team's got solid starters but not enough firepower outside of Giannis and Christian Wood, it's looking like, to be a championship contender.
Yeah, I also got my eye on DeJounte Murray. If he can get some increased production in the coming weeks with a LaMarcus Aldridge and a Derek White injury, see if this team can make some noise in the top scoring position for each week coming forward. But we'll see about that one. Now we're going to crack into our top 5, and it's forever 110, jumping one spot after once again being the top team in the league. Still without big man Karl Anthony Towns, so you can't really feel too confident about this team. But Mike Conley filling in admirably last week. Maybe he returns back to his average ways this week, but Markelle falls off to a decent start to the season, not as prolific as some might have envisioned, but off to a relatively good start in fantasy. And then Blake Griffin, if he could stay healthy, he just got to stay healthy. Concussions and back-to-backs that he's resting. If he gets back to the Blake Griffin where they're feeding him in the post, creating off dribble, things like that, this team's probably good for a couple wins here and there.
Yeah, I think health is a major factor for this team. Fully healthy, definitely one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the league based on its roster construction. But one thing I would say for this team is you got 4 guards with the emergence of LaMelo this past week who are start worthy. If I were this team, I'd be looking to package a 2-for-1 maybe, see if you can secure a all-star type of guard for 2 of your guards. But you got to love the production you're seeing out of Julius Randle, same as RJ Barrett, 40.5 minutes a night. I mean, he's gonna continue to put up stats as long as he's seeing that many minutes. But we'll see if this team can stay afloat with Cat out, and if it does, then very scary down the line.
Yeah, getting back to that New York Knicks conversation, any starting for the New York Knicks is going to get heavy minutes with Thibodeau. He's known for this in the past. He's going to go forward with it as he's shown this year. So, maybe a piece of that New York Knicks puzzle is going to be pretty valuable coming down the line this year. So keep an eye out for that one. But yeah, LaMelo Ball, if he can keep his production going, it looks like they're starting to work him into more of a 30-minute rotational piece for that team. If he can start chipping away at Terry Rozier and Devonte Graham, because he's been struggling this year, look for LaMelo Ball to be a key piece going forward for this team. Let's go to previously mentioned Devonte Graham's unit right here, Dirty Sexton, actually dropping a spot even though he's 2-0. And I've already mentioned this Devonte Graham not getting it done points-wise as he was last year. Teams are starting to hone in on his abilities, his smaller frame, starting to use that against him, just not being as productive as he was last year. And then Colin Sexton getting it done points-wise, but can he get the assists and steals and limit the turnovers to make him a valuable fantasy point guard in points leagues? That's yet to be determined. But Aaron Gordon, a good game last game, but he's been struggling in the past, which is very surprising given a Jonathan Isaac injury, and he's clearly the number 2 big for that Orlando Magic team. So I think those 3 guys got to get it going if this team's going to continue its 2-0 run. But that's the reason for the drop, just because struggling a little bit to start these last 2 weeks.
Yeah. With LaMelo cutting into Devonte Graham's minutes in production, I'm definitely worried about continuing to have him in my starting lineup. But the rest of this team just all around solid. I mean, Luka, you're good for 45, 50 fantasy points a night. Ayton, Bam, and Aaron Gordon, all 3 solid big men who are going to put up big stats. I think the key to this team will be whether it'll have enough firepower to overcome our top 3 teams, or is this team number 3 or 4?
This is number 4.
Yeah, there's top 3 teams, and even maybe that forever 110 team with fully healthy. Does it have enough firepower to beat teams like that at full strength? Is something I'm going to have to keep an eye out for, because although this team is solid, I'm not seeing the stars there to be a championship team.
Yeah. Maybe pushing for a trade later down the line for a Dirty Sexton team, or even maybe an Elfrid Payton emerges for that New York Knicks team to take that point guard spot, get those minutes for Tom Thibodeau, maybe put up some production to fill in for Devonte Graham. At number 3, it's going to be Van Gundy's Gangsters, another 2-0 team, climbing the ranks just like he was last week. A little bit lower of a climb for him this week, but still, you got to feel very confident if you're going into this week for Van Gundy's Gangsters. CJ McCollum acting like he's Damian Lillard, points out of the wazoo for him. Marcus Smart missing a game this week, so you can't like that. But Jason Tatum and Brandon Ingram, they were questionable first and second overall picks for this team coming into the year, but they're proving that they're bona fide starters in every format, no matter what. Also, all-stars in the case of Jason Tatum, proving that he belongs in that Eastern Conference starting lineup. And even Brandon Ingram, he wants that spot again this year. So feeling good if you're Van Gundy's Gangsters.
Yeah, Van Gundy's Gangsters. Team's looking scarier than ever. Um, Ingram and Tatum both looking like they're taking that next leap towards teetering MVP of the league status. Uh, One thing I'm going to look out for with this team is DeRozan. He's been playing out of his mind fantasy-wise so far this year. Not sure if he'll continue to, although it's looking like he will because he's not seeing major minutes and he's still putting up extremely good production. But this got to be one of his best fantasy seasons in a while. So if he's able to keep it up, then this team is super scary. But that's something we're gonna have to keep an eye out for. The one thing I am worried about with this team is the extreme lack of depth on the bench. Hero and Larry Markkinen, both solid, but not sure if I'm going to feel comfortable starting either of them at any point in time. And then the last three guys, Anthony Edwards, Kuzma, and Okoro. I mean, guys that you're questioning whether they should even be rostered in fantasy basketball. So one thing I'm going to have to keep an eye out for.
Really good point. If this team is to have an injury to one of its top guys, I think they're dropping outside of the top 5, top 6 potentially because there's really nobody to replace them. So if the team is ever to stay healthy, they're going to be fighting down the line. But yeah, absolutely nothing to replace them with on their bench. Good point there. Let's get into the number 2 team. We're foreshadowing number 1, but it's the Under Armour All-Stars staying put at number 2, getting a win, 1-1. Steph Curry, 62-point game. Gotta love that. Getting the highest scoring total of the week. Malcolm Brogdon proving that everyone's sleeping on him going in the third, fourth round, maybe potentially a second round pick the way he's playing. And then Joel Embiid, it's all about staying healthy for him.
Yeah, this team has championship DNA written all over it. Really no holes in that starting lineup and enough firepower to compete with anybody in the league. I think whether this team is the ultimate champion or not is definitely going to depend on Embiid's health because if he is healthy, I think this is the best roster in the league. But yeah, I mean, also going to have to see if Zach LaVine keep up this production because he's been playing out of his mind so far this year. So if he's able to, then this team is super scary.
Yeah, I think one thing to point out is a Mason Plumlee pickup off waivers. Why Mason Plumlee is on the waiver wire to begin with, I have no idea. Should be rostered and never dropped in any format. That decision blows my mind that he's out there. But great pickup by Under Armour All-Stars, taking advantage of other people's weaknesses. And then this team, he's got a trade. I know he's going to make a trade later on the season. Colby White, Baisley on the bench, a couple guys on the bench. You really could get into other teams' starting lineups. This team might be unbeatable if it is to make a trade down the line and even improve on this current roster.
For sure.
Let's go to the number 1 team. I'm not sure the name changed to the Fig Newtons. Very interesting call by the general manager there, but 2-0. 2-0 there for the Fig Newtons. And looking pretty solid. Look, there's only a couple weaknesses in this lineup. Montrezl Harrell, not looking good so far this season. Not like he did in the Clipper uniform. But still, a LeBron James and Andre Drummond-led team. You're going to put up every single statistic, every single night. Plenty of points from those two to carry this team down the line. And Malik Beasley, probably the only guy you're not feeling too great about. But even then, without a Karl Anthony Towns, somebody's got to put the ball in the hoop. So maybe Malik Beasley gets it done.
Yeah, props to the new name Fig Newtons, taking it to my ass last week. Hell of a week, big man, but I don't know if you noticed this, but he's actually starting Keldon Johnson now over Montrezl Harrell, who has been able to put up some solid numbers in the absence of LaMarcus Aldridge. So quite a good fill-in for him right there. But yeah, we saw how dangerous this team is in week 1 and even last week with a relatively, I guess you could say, a down week from Drummond, considering he averaged over 50 in week 1, only averaging 38 last week. The rest of his roster able to step it up and top to bottom put up big numbers. This team has done nothing to lose its number 1 spot. As I mentioned last week, don't think they're solidified number 1 team. I think there's a couple other teams out there that have just as much of a say or just as much of a right to be here. But this team doesn't look like it has many holes and has earned that number one spot and will continue to hold on to it until something major happens.
Yeah, it's going to come down to this Malik Beasley and Keldon Johnson play. If they're able to fill in nicely for this team, no problem with having them at number one. But if they struggle a little bit this week, maybe we see a little shift in dynamics going forward, and Fig Newton's dropping a little bit in our ranks. But that is going to do it for the Fantasy Birds Power Ranking Show. We thank you for coming out. We thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys next week.
Also, wait, thank you, Coca-Cola, everybody. Go grab yourself one very tasty drink.
You already know.